The history of data tools, Microsoft's development environment for SQL Server, goes a long way back. And while we're going to review this, the great update to this is that the IDE for developers, DBAs, and BI architects are now all within one installation. It all started with something called DataDude for database projects and has progressed to a development environment for business intelligence. The two development environments have been developed separately because of a cycle of releases from Microsoft. The BI features would come later than the database engine features. Now they're all caught up with each other, and that 2-year release cycle has improved this. So there's no need to have a separate installation. This relieves a lot of confusion. There's a separate installation, and it has been in the product for the last 2 versions, but the confusion has been erased by better communication through blogs from Microsoft. You still have a link on the Installation Center while installing the services for Management Studio and Data Tools, but they're separate steps, so you can still install from there. The reason they made the change is most DBAs do not want client tools on the servers, so this is why it's been given a separate installation. A feature that seems to help with staying current with all Microsoft products is updates to an application. SQL Server Data Tools has adopted this standard and is supported by a monthly or bi-monthly blog with the updated information. Test driving these features will help you better understand the capabilities and explosive features that are in Data Tools for SQL Server 2016. DataDude was the first tool for DBAs used in this Visual Studio shell. The main objective was to manage databases and the schema. This first introduction to managed deployments are now referred to as DevOps, and this was a release management and versioning of a database with the versioning of application code. Here we'll be better able to manage the structure and scripts for tables, primary keys, indexes, and foreign keys. The code and functions and stored procedures are nice, especially when integrated with the version control, source control, so you can compare the different releases. A feature that I use a lot is the data and schema compare. This enables a user to compare data between tables with the same structure and requires a unique constraint or primary key. There is additional ability to compare the schemas of 2 different databases like Dev versus QA, and then you can get a list of the changes, or you can actually generate scripts for these changes and deploy them, say, to the QA environment from whatever was in the development environment. Business intelligence starts with integration services, or SSIS. This enterprise ETL tool needs Visual Studio to create and test packages, and these packages usually move data from a source to a destination. Integration services has been around for a long time, and the original DTS packages are now better implemented inside of Visual Studio. Analysis services, or SSAS, has OLAP capabilities with the multidimensional cubes, and the latest in compressed data warehouse reporting is now in the tabular module. Data mining, though, the original advanced analytics from Microsoft, is included in this service. Visual Studio, again, is where you develop data mining projects. Finally, reports and mobile development can be accomplished with reporting services, or SSRS. There are many additions in 2016 for SSRS, and this was the biggest area of BI improvements in SQL Server 2016. The installation can be included as a shell of Visual Studio. So if you do not have a current license for Visual Studio, the shell will be installed and it is absolutely free. So let's talk about the installation. The first thing is you need to download the Data Tools installer from the internet. Here's a link which is a little more descriptive than some of the old Microsoft links. Or if you're installing from the installation program, you can get a link in the Installation Center for the full SQL Server 2016 installation. You will notice a link here instead of having to step through the main installation where it used to be. and select it in the shared components of the install. What you see on this slide is the main download page for SQL Server Data Tools. There's so much more clarity with the new Microsoft site. Here you can read about installing SQL Server Data Tools with a current installation of Visual Studio or the standalone install with the free shell of Visual Studio. There's also a link in that left portion where some of these arrows are and give you a little more details about SSDT in Visual Studio 2015. The first is called Change Log for SSDT, and this is where you get the latest information about the changes to the versions. You also have a link to prior releases of SSDT, so SSDT would just be the data dude or data projects, and you have another one for SSDT-BI, which is SSIS, SSAS, and SSRS. That's all for previous versions of SQL Server Data Tool before SQL Server 2016. The third line are other SQL Server tools, and this site will provide a link to those additional tools you can use with SQL Server. A lot has been written, and you want to go check some of these out to see if it assists you in either being a DBA or a developer. The last arrow points to where there's a new version of SQL Server in the works. When it says release candidate, this means this link's going to give you details on using the beta, or what I call alpha, environment of the next release of SQL Server. So if you're real courageous and you want to go see what's coming up in SQL Server, you can click this and get the next SSDT installation for your current system. So now let's talk about updates. Those are those pesky little items that pop on you that you absolutely do not want to touch unless you have to. Usually it's because you found a bug in the application and one of the cumulative updates fixes that bug. The pain is you do the install and then that last update presents a new bug. I don't know if that's gone away, but Microsoft has been better at listing these things on their blogs. So if you go find the blogs for the updates, they're a lot more accurate so you can track bug fixes and new items that have been added. They usually come about every month for SQL Server Data Tools, and it will include the new feature list as well as the bug list. You might not need something like change data capture enabled on databases for importing into a database project, but you might want something like temporal table support, which is new in SQL Server 2016. These are just some of the items that I picked out from the June and July releases posted on this particular blog. The SSI development environment actually lets you deploy to previous versions of SQL Server. This had support in that first release, but the new updates have fixed some bugs in it. So keep up to date on these blogs. They can be scanned in about 5 minutes, but if you want more details, you can read in depth, which might take you about 15 or 30 minutes to read the entire update. Here is the download page for downloading SQL Server Data Tools for 2016. You'll get a little brief information, and then you can download the SQL Server Data Tools, which is listed here as version 6.5. In the left, you can see the change log. There's a data tier applications, as well as the previous releases of data tools, the other SQL Server tools, and the release candidate. You also have the licensing terms here. So once we get that downloaded, then we can do the installation. Here, I'm going to go to my downloads and I see the installation for Management Studio. I can have one here also that is for SQL Server Data Tools. Launch, it's going to give you a screen like the one you see here. And really, you're just agreeing to the licensing terms by clicking the install button. It'll install now the SQL Server Data Tools, which contains both database project and all the BI development features, and those include integration services, analysis services, and reporting services. We are in the Microsoft Visual Studio Integrated Development Environment, or IDE. Here we can create a new database project. We'll go to File, New, and create a new project. First you'll see the business intelligence templates, then eventually see the SQL Server. And here's database project. We'll give our database project a name, and then we'll go ahead and click OK. Next, we have an empty database project. So we can start creating the tables, their primary keys and indexes, store procedures, views, functions right now, or we can import from an existing one. So I'm going to right click, click import, and go to database. Next, I'm going to create a new connection to my SQL Server instance, and I'm going to grab the database that I want to import. I could test the connection to make sure it's okay, click OK. There's some additional options. You could change some of the target project information, or you can change some of these imports. We really don't want the logins or permissions in this database, but we do want the database settings. You have a different tree structure either by schema or by object type, or you can use a tree structure of schema / object type. So if we had a DBO, a product, a sales schema, the objects, tables, indexes, views, store procedures would be a subfolder under the particular schema folder. We'll keep that and we'll click Start. What it's going to do is going to go to that instance of SQL Server and it's going to go grab the metadata for that particular database. It'll grab all that information and import it into our solution. Here we see there's a security schema and a DBO schema, and then we have our tables. We can go to the customer table, and if we wanted to, we can actually add some additional information in here. So if we wanted another column like insert date, we can actually create the column here, and now it'll actually appear in our particular project. So I forgot one of the brackets, so let me finish that to get rid of the error. And now we should have a clean install. You notice the GUI got updated as well. So if we were to save this, it's saved in the database project. Now we could actually do a deploy, which will do a compare to the actual database and script out our differences. That's something inside of database projects. You can actually manage the store procedures, views, and functions in here as well. Before we end this particular demo, I want to go up to the Tools menu choice and go to SQL Server. Here are two things that I really like. There's a data comparison and a schema comparison. We can actually go into these particular items and actually select different databases to compare. We can even compare our project, which is the current one we have open, to what's actually out there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to connect to that SQL Server instance and grab that database and click OK. Now I've got this little compare tool that'll compare my project to an actual deployed database or even a production, development, or QA database and show me the changes. So I can see the changes between what's out there and now what's inside of my project. And basically it's going to show me that customer change that I just made. I can also have two separate databases with data in it, and there's one called Data Compare. I really like this. When I'm importing data from a particular source, I'm able to compare that what I imported in development with what's actually in a production import, and I kind of can go through the changes and see if it was a good change or not a good change. One I frequently use it for is things where I'm comparing floats to numbers, because sometimes those are off because of scientific notation. So this is our database project. It's saved and can be deployed based on scripts to any SQL Server instance that supports the schemas that you did create. Inside of the Visual Studio 2015 IDE, we can create integration services projects. So I'm going to go to the Projects, New Projects menu choice, Business Intelligence, and go to Integration Services. There's a wizard that lets you import from files or deploy packages, or you can just create a new blank one. We're just going to create a new one and click OK. One of the nice things inside of integration services is now everything's related to a project. So if you notice here, there's project parameters and there's connection managers at the project level. When we create a connection to a particular data source, now it can be shared between the different packages. So we're going to look at that source database we picked earlier, and we're also going to grab the destination for our data warehouse. We're using OLADB connections because that's the most common and fastest. We can actually rename it in here as well. So I might want to call this one the source, and I might want to call this one the destination. Now, inside of the package itself, you can see those project on the bottom left, project connections. Those are now shared between packages. So if I create a new package, I'm going to still have those two same ones. Now, I can also create project parameters which can be changed frequently. Inside of the Visual Studio 2015 Integrated Development Environment, or IDE, we're going to create another new project. Here the projects we're going to look at are analysis services. These are the different OLAP routines that are within SQL Server installations that give you the ability to do some data warehouse or business intelligence reporting. Here we have the original multidimensional cube and data mining, being able to import from an existing model, creating a new tabular project, or importing from Power Pivot or from a tabular. So your data analyst can build models inside of Power Pivot, which is inside of Excel, and then we can import those and deploy them to an enterprise server to be shared with more than one person. We're just going to create a new tabular model for now, give it a name, and it's going to prompt us for the existing instance where we can test this. So I'm going to give an instance name here, and I'm going to test it to make sure it can connect, and we'll do the 2016 release and click OK. So now we need to import data, model it, create relationships and measures, and then we can deploy that. That's with analysis services. The other project type is reporting services. So let's look at one of our mobile designed reports. Here's a set of gauges based on the car type, and then if we go to the preview button, we can provide a year with a month and view the report. So now the formatting inside of reporting services allows you to format some of these more modern looking components into the shape of a tablet and or mobile phone.